probably not really surprising that our era of modern industry and mass politics is also going to be an era of really dynamic ideas. We're going to have new thoughts on science, new thoughts on society, new thoughts on medicine, new thoughts on culture, new ideas on politics. And all of these are going to be universally shared, though not necessarily agreed upon. Some of them will be quite divisive. Many of these modern ideas are going to challenge well-established old-style ways of thinking. And that clash is going to build upon other types of clashes, economic, political, colonial, imperial rivalries. We'll also have clashes of ideas now. Traditional ideas and modern ideas. And how do you reconcile? And this will work for sort of the common people, but it will also have to be encountered by modern institutions. Three of our big thinkers in our new world of ideas. We'll include one who dates back just a little bit into material we've already covered. That's Charles Darwin and Darwin's theory of evolution. Now, he took his trip on HMS Beagle back in the 1840s, and he had worked on his theories of evolution. He hadn't developed them. Darwin didn't invent evolution. Darwin simply adapted evolution to a new way of thinking, to a new explanation for the development of humanity. So, On the Origin of Species, which had been released earlier, hadn't made a huge splash in terms of the popular community. The scientific community embraced it, looked at it, argued about it, worked with it. But Darwin's contribution a couple of decades later, toward the end of the 1800s, in The Descent of Man, is going to be far more controversial. And in this, Darwin is going to talk more specifically about survival and mutation and the elements that lead to a species either becoming differentiated or specializing, or issues of how everything got to be everything, at least all living animals. In this, it was mostly a scientific theory. It didn't have a lot of political applications, at least not the way that Darwin put it out there. Probably underneath Darwin and evolution, I should put Herbert Spencer, who was a British political interpreter of these ideas. It's Herbert Spencer who gives us survival of the fittest. It's Herbert Spencer who's going to take Darwinism and start to apply it to popular culture, so start to try to measure groups of people. The Darwinistic ideas, these Darwinian ideas of evolution and development and specialization, are going to be used, misused as far as Darwin was concerned, to drive racial theories, to drive class theories, to attempt to separate within the realm of humanity winners and losers, superior races and inferior races. And that's nothing that Darwin had set out, but that application, that popular application of his ideas, is going to become very controversial. Freud is going to introduce the idea of psychoanalysis, the idea of psychology. And Freud's big idea, his contribution, is going to be the notion of the id, the ego, the superego. That all humans are sort of a combination of their base desires, their id, and these are sex desires, these are, desires for bodily wants, what you want to eat, what you want to do, sort of the me element of, taking care of yourself. The superego, as opposed to that, is sort of the controls that society puts on. This is your conscience, this is, your better thoughts, it's the little angel on your shoulder tapping you and saying, you know better than to do this. And then ego is how these two work it out, how they work it out. But Freud's arguing everybody's got this, and behaviors and the way that people live and think can all be explained through these kind of models, these kind of metaphors. Freud also going to give us some ideas that will play out real interestingly. Complexes, Oedipal complex, maybe you've heard about that, death wish stuff. It's all going to get a real revitalization, especially after World War I. But Freud is putting these ideas out there, and his notion of psychoanalysis, talking to people, investigating the kind of things that went into their life, the kind of experiences they've had, and then interpreting their behavior based on this combination of id and superego and their particular situation. Finally, we've got Albert Einstein. Einstein stirs the entire pot with the theory of relativity. Science at this point really is sort of challenging some of the old standards. It had been difficult enough for medieval society to come to grips with Newtonian physics and the rules that were established during the scientific revolution and the mathematical sort of principles that were applied to not only this world but assumed for the entire universe that had come out of that, and that it had sort of squeezed the place of God, a divine entity, some kind of creator being, out and replaced it with a very mathematical, formulaic sort of situation. Einstein comes along with other scientists at this period, and says, well, all those rules that we had gone ahead and said, well, they're absolute, they are the governing rules of everything, yeah, not so much. And relativity is the idea that where you stand determines what you see. How fast you're moving has an impact on what you're experiencing. That there are relative forces that are coming into play all the time, and that make those absolute rules that we thought we knew less absolute. All of this combines to make a lot of people very uncomfortable. This modern way of thinking, all of these sort of flying in the face of traditional ideas and traditional values, are going to unsettle a lot of people. They're not going to be comfortable with this. They're going to look for those sort of steady places in society. They're going to look for answers that seem to be more comforting than the kind of random or inexplicable or at least difficult to understand kind of answers that are being offered to them by modern scientists, modern philosophers, and modern thinkers.